Hi guys, Andreas here, and today we're doing something a little special. Now, ever since the end of 2016, beginning 2017, I've been shooting with Sony APSC mirrorless cameras, and I've been very happy with them until recently, where I found a fantastic deal on a Sony A7C, so I ended up upgrading to full frame territory. Now, that's not to say that I was unhappy with the a6000 series cameras, which I used to shoot. So I had the a6000, which I still have, the a6400, the a6500, and they're fantastic cameras. So if you're an APS-C shooter, this video is for you because I've tested a lot of lenses and I've owned a lot of lenses on that system over the years. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to create a little bit of a tier list for you guys with all the lenses that I've shot with on the APS-C Sony platform, and sort of give you a quick rundown of what I liked, what I disliked, what I used it for, and things like that. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Okay guys, a couple of things to keep in mind as we get started here. All the lenses at the bottom are arranged by focal length right now, so there's no other rhyme or reason to the order that you see. Number two, there are some notable lenses missing here, and that's because I never owned them or didn't shoot them for a significant enough period of time to have an opinion and to give you guys some guidance as to whether or not they were good or not. So having said that, the Sigma 56 f1.4 is a notable omission. Great reviewed lens. By all accounts, it's the sharpest APS-C lens. So I wouldn't worry too much. If you're considering it, just buy it. I'm sure you'll be happy with it. The other notable omissions here are the Tamron 11-20 f2.8, because it came out so recently that by the time it was released and it was available for purchase, I had already moved to full frame. So if it was available earlier, I probably would have owned it for sure by the reviews and by the way it looks. And of course, given its size, I'm a big fan of small lenses. I think you'll realize that as we move along here. So with that out of the way, let's start with the Sony 10-18 f4 OSS. Now, this lens I got at around the same time as the Rokinon f2 with the intention of keeping only one of the two. Primarily, I wanted it for real estate and astrophotography. Landscapes, I wasn't using it too much because I'm not crazy about, subjectively speaking, ultra wide for landscapes. I like something a little bit tighter in the 16 to 18 range. But you know what? It was a sharp lens. The OSS was nice to have. And the zoom range, of course, was a nice added bonus here. The only reason I can't put it higher than I'm going to put it, which is in the B tier, is because, well, there's two reasons. One is the f4, which especially on a crop body isn't terribly fast. So as the light goes down, you're going to have to crank up your ISO quite a bit with this lens. And the other issue is a quality control issue that a lot of reviewers have mentioned. I didn't encounter it personally, just so you know. But apparently there is a lot of variance from copy to copy with this lens and issues with it being decentered. So just keep that in mind if you're considering it. Oh, and yeah, there's probably a third thing, the price. It's a friggin' expensive lens for what you get. And for the same price, considering you get the Tamron at f2.8, you get the Tamron all day, every day. All right. Next, we have the Rokinon 12mm f2. This lens is a little bit different, and you know what? It's the one I kept between the two. It is a manual focus only lens, super sharp lens, super nice color rendition, easy to shoot, easy to focus with focus peaking on these cameras. I can't say enough good things about this lens. The next lens is probably the worst one I've shot, and I think a lot of Sony APS-C shooters will share that opinion most likely. It's the Sony 16mm f2.8. If I could just not rank it at all, I wouldn't rank it. But since I made myself a little chart, I will put it in the bottom rank. Absolutely do not buy this lens if you value the quality of your images and video. It is terrible. The only redeeming factor it has is its size. And even then, there are better options for a marginal increase in size and weight. So I would say avoid this lens at all costs. What people say about it is absolutely true. Moving along, we're going from the worst to my absolute favorite lens on this system. And you know what? Even with my full frame camera, I kind of regret selling it now. I do miss it. Super sharp, super fast focusing and close focusing it. There's nothing this lens can't do. I mean, I friggin' loved it, man. The Sigma 16mm f1.4 Absolutely incredible lens. I mean, by far my favorite lens on the system. The f1.4 was so nice. Stabilization wasn't that much of an issue because you're still at 16 mil, which is also nice. The only kind of downside, if you could call it that, was the size and weight, but that's only in relation to other lenses in that focal range area. It is a little bit larger and a little bit heavier than average, but man, oh man, for the amount of sharpness and the image quality you get out of that lens, don't even hesitate. And especially at the price. I mean, it's not very expensive for an f1.4 lens. I recommend it all day, every day. And like I said, I kind of wish I kept it. I might even pick one up to use with my A7C for video. All right, next is an interesting one. It's the Sony 16-50 kit lens, the power zoom. Now, this lens gets a lot of flack from a lot of people because it's a bit long in the tooth now. It's probably 7 or 8 years old. It was never terribly sharp, never terribly fast. It is the first lens I had with my camera, as with most Sony APS-C shooters, I gather. Here's the thing with it, though. It's so small and so inconspicuous and so lightweight. Like, this lens in combination with the a6000, the whole package is, I think, under 450 grams or something. I'll put the actual number up on the screen. But and it looks like a point and shoot when you're taking it out shooting, right? So it allows for some really interesting perspectives, and you know, people don't look at you weird because it's not a big camera rig, right? So I personally enjoyed shooting it. It's not, like I said, the sharpest lens in the world. I'm gonna throw it into the B tier. I know a lot of people put it a lot lower, but you know what? I have a soft spot for that lens. It was my first one on the system, and honestly, the lens that I learned a lot about photography with. So next, we've got the Sony 16-55 f2.8, which for anybody shooting on Sony APS-C was a long time coming. So fast aperture standard zoom lens on Sony APS-C. Fantastic lens. Definitely deserves to be up in the top tier of lenses. The quality you get out of this lens is amazing. It can replace several primes. The only thing I'm going to mention is that it's not stabilized. So if you're shooting on an a6500 or an a6600, fantastic lens, pick it up. You will not regret it despite its price tag. However, if you're shooting on a lens that's not stabilized, so a6000, 6100, 6300, 6400, this next guy is the one you want. The Tamron 17-70 f2.8, which also belongs in the top tier. Now, the difference between the Tamron 17-70 and the Sony 16-55 from an image quality perspective is non-existent, just so you know. They're both as fast as each other. The Tamron is a tad longer and a tad heavier, but nothing you'd notice in real-world use. I've seen a lot of reviewers mention that it's a tad soft at 70 mils, but here's the thing. The Sony doesn't go to 70 mils. And at 55 mils, the sharpness is extremely comparable, if not identical. So if anything, the 70 mil just gives you bonus reach at that point, right? And it's significantly cheaper than the Sony. So if you're shooting on a non-stabilized body, get the Tamron. It's stabilized, it's fast, it's sharp. You'll be more than happy with it. If you're shooting on a stabilized body with IBIS, the 16-55 is probably the best zoom lens you can buy on the system. Speaking of zoom lenses, next we have the Sony 18-55. Not much to say about this lens except for the fact that it's old. It doesn't have the redeeming qualities of the 16-50 kit lens. This is the old kit lens for those of you who don't know. And by redeeming qualities, I mean it's not tiny like the power zoom. It doesn't have, you know, the power zoom, of course. I'm just not a fan. It's not as wide. The difference between 16 and 18 millimeters can be quite significant. So yeah, it's just not a great lens. And if you're gonna buy a lens by itself, avoid it. Now, if you're buying a used camera and it comes with it, great, use it. It's fine, but I wouldn't touch this lens at this point. Now, the next two are probably two of the most controversial lenses. And I know I'm going to piss off a lot of people with this choice, but first we have the 18-105 G lens, the power zoom. Now, There's nothing terribly wrong with it in terms of, the optical quality. It's a sharp lens, slightly sharper than the kit lens, not quite as sharp as the 16-55. It isn't constant f4 aperture, so for video shooters, that's a big benefit. It's an internal zoom, also for video shooters, that's a big benefit. The power zoom, again, video shooters will love that. However, for me, I primarily use my lenses for, hiking and landscapes and street photography and things of that nature. So it was a little too big and heavy for my liking, despite the fact that it offered a good zoom range, which is the reason why I place the 18-135 lens, which is today a kit lens, one notch above the 18-105. Now, if you look at reviews online and comparisons between these two lenses, there's not a ton to choose sharpness wise. In my case, the two copies that I shot with, the 18-135 was slightly sharper than the 18-105, almost as sharp as the Tamron 17-70. I do have a comparison between the 17-70 and the 18-135. So if you guys want to check that out, I'm going to link the video in the description below and somewhere on the screen, so you'll have that. But yeah, the 18-135, for its zoom range that it offers, for the size and weight, I mean, it's tough to beat, honestly. I really liked that lens. It was one of my favorites on the system. Again, it's probably the one that I had the longest, I would say, other than the 16-50 kit lens. And yeah, no complaints except for the fact that it's not super fast. It's f3.5 to 5.6. However, as you'll see in this sample photo, 135 mils at f5.6 can still get you a decent amount of bokeh depending on the distance of your background and the subject you're shooting. So yeah, it's a good all-around lens. There's no complaints there. Next, we have the Sony 20mm f2.8. So Sony's second pancake lens after the 16 2.8 debacle. The Sony 22.8 is interesting. It's sharper than the 16. That's not to say it's terribly sharp. There's some benefit to it being tiny and flat. The only reason I place it in the C tier instead of the B tier, for the same reasons as the 16-50, is because it is a prime lens. So despite the fact that it's 2.8 at 20 mils, it's not that much faster than the kit lens, and it's marginally sharper, if at all. So if you're given the choice between these two, take the flexibility of the zoom all day for a marginal size and sharpness decrease. I mean, yeah, the Sony 22.8, it's good-ish, I guess, but there are better options out there for Sony APSC shooters, even if it is really, really tiny on the camera. Now, speaking of tiny, the first upgrade lens I bought after the 16-50 kit lens was this guy. Now, a lot of people probably won't recognize this. It is the Sigma 30mm f2.8, but not the art version that came out more recently, not the last release. This is the EXDN version, which is the older version. And let me tell you, this lens, in terms of sharpness, in terms of size, in terms of price, in terms of weight, there is not a whole lot I can say bad about this lens, if anything. So just so you know, it's about maybe half an inch at most longer than the kit lens collapsed. It's f2.8, so it's quite fast. It's 30mm, which is a great all-around focal length. It's a 45mm full frame equivalent. So street photography, portraits, you can do a lot of different things with it. And you know what? It is razor sharp, especially for a lens that I think at the time that I bought it used, and it cost me like 180 bucks Canadian, which is like $5 US. So yeah, it's a fantastic lens. So if you can find one on the used market and you're looking for a sharp walk around lens, that's smaller than the next one we're going to talk about, this is a fantastic lens. Now, what did I replace this with when I got rid of it was the Sigma 30mm f1.4, which is going right to the top. Again, kind of like the Sigma 16, super sharp, super fast at f1.4, good focal length for just about anything. I really enjoyed using this lens. It's a tad bigger than the 30mm 2.8, but for the size difference, you're getting f1.4, right? So the benefit outweighs the con, I guess, over there. The only negative about this lens, I would say, is the fact that it does suffer from a little bit of chromatic aberration wide open at f1.4, so that's something to watch out for. Otherwise, fantastic walk-around lens. No complaints there. Now, the last two lenses on the list. This is going to be for people who are looking for portrait lenses, portrait primes more specifically, because honestly, the 16-55 from Sony and the 17-70 from Tamron are very good portrait lenses. The Sony 50mm f1.8 OSS lens, it's a really good lens. It's sharp. The stabilization is pretty good if you're into video shooting at 50 mils. There really isn't anything terribly wrong with it. It's a nice looking lens too, I guess. Although it does tend to get scratched up. The finish on it is not super durable, I found. But it is a pretty good lens. It does tend to focus hunt a little bit in low light. Not a ton, just a little bit. And it's f1.8, right? So it's a pretty fast lens. So for portraits, it's a recommended lens, I guess. However, my preferred portrait lens from the focal lengths that I tried at the time was this guy here, which is the Sigma 60mm f2.8 art lens. Now, it is an older lens. It's been supplanted by the Sigma 56 now, of course. But in terms of sharpness, it, at the time of its release especially, was the sharpest lens on the system. So you can't really go wrong. From what I've seen on the used market, you can pick one up for like $100 US maybe nowadays. So they're pretty cheap, easy to pick up. So if you want to get into portrait photography but don't want to spend a ton and you just want to try your hand at it, either of these two lenses will do. Honestly, it will really depend whether you want a native Sony lens with OSS or a slightly sharper lens but with a slower aperture. So that pretty much completes our lens list. Overall impressions, you know, for a system where people complain a lot about Sony APS-C not having quality lenses, as you can see by the looks of my tier list here, there are some good quality lenses that have come out over the years, and especially now when you consider the Sigma 56 1.4, which is in here, the Tamron 11-20 2.8, which is in here, and even the Sony telephoto, right, the 70-350 G lens, and the forthcoming Tamron 18-300, which is super interesting. There are a lot of good options for Sony APS-C. So, and they're great camera bodies too. So I would not hesitate to recommend any of these lenses to whoever is an APS-C shooter. It will probably cost you a lot less than what I did in terms of upgrading to full frame. And you know what? Given the quality that's out now, you can get really good glass for Sony APS-C. And worst case, if you think you might upgrade to full frame at some point, which is the one mistake that I made back in the day, mind you, these lenses didn't exist back then, but you can check out a lot of full frame glass now that's coming out is small, especially from Rokinon / Samyang, and they fit perfect and they balance perfectly on crop sensor body. So if you think that you're going to upgrade to full frame, those are some lenses to check out. But yeah, if you're an APS-C shooter and if you're into portrait photography, Sigma 56 all day, Sigma 60, Sony F50 f1.8, you can't go wrong. If you want a standard zoom lens, either the Sony G or the Tamron 17-70, great lenses, depending on whether your body has stabilization or not. For astrophotography, the Rokinon 12mm f2 is going to serve you very, very well. If you want something a little tighter, the Sigma 16 f1.4 is fast enough to do astro, not quite as wide, of course. The Sigma 30 1.4 is a great walk-around all-purpose prime. Aside from that, the 18-135, if you're into hiking and stuff and you want something relatively low weight and high zoom range, that will be your lens. And if you're a video shooter, I highly, highly recommend the 18-105 instead of the 18-135 because of all the benefits we mentioned. For video shooters, it's going to give you more pros than cons. So that pretty much does it for the tier list, guys. Let me know in the description below if you're looking to buy a lens. What are you considering? Did this tier list help you out a little bit? And if you have any questions about any of these lenses that I've shot with and have experience with, and I can help answer them for you before making a purchase, just leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to answer as fast as I can. So that pretty much does it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.